The Pope has been dipping his toes in politics lately. Leading up to the 2024 election, he was talking about the candidates and who Catholics should vote for, basically. Pope Francis pushes false claim that both presidential candidates are against life, quote unquote. This is on friendlyatheist.com, Hemant Mehta's blog. In a false equivalence worthy of a stereotypical New York Times headline, Pope Francis said Kamala Harris and Donald Trump were both against life. No one expects the Pope to be a political pundit, but the head of the Catholic Church is regularly seen as a moral authority, at least by members of his religion. And that moral authority said yesterday, during a news conference, that U.S. voters should choose the lesser of two evils in the upcoming election because they're both wrong on the only issues he cares about. So I hear you thinking, how does he think that Trump is not pro-life? Here's the answer. This is a quote from the article. Sending migrants away, not allowing them to grow, not letting them have a life is something wrong. It is cruelty, Francis said in a news conference on a plane as he returned to Rome after his long trip to Southeast Asia and Oceania. Wow, I don't hear people refer to Australia and New Zealand that way often. Sending a child away from the womb of the mother is murder because there is life, and we must speak clearly about these things. Okay. If you're going to go all the way down that road, then, I mean, there's life in an egg cell too, right? The cell is living, so is that like murder also? Is there a pile of dead bodies in some dude's sock next to his bed? Like, how far back are you going to go? Why did you stop there? It's literally two cells. It's not murder to get an abortion. It's not. They are like two cells. I think that most abortions happen before 10 weeks or something like that. At a certain point, it's like literally invisible. Like you can't even see it with your eyes. It's so small. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. You know, I've been reading a lot about World War II because I'm writing a book about this. By the way, owenmorgan.com. Check out the book if you're interested. It's about denazifying the church after World War II and about Hitler's manipulation of the church and all that other stuff. It's pretty interesting. And I have another book, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, about my time in Jehovah's Witnesses and how the religion works and everything. Anyway, in World War II, or before it happened, in Germany, 1933, that's when Hitler took over. Was February to April, basically, is when things really started ramping up heavily. And as soon as he took over, as like, he was just appointed chancellor. So he's basically like he just won the presidency effectively. He didn't win a vote, he was appointed, but that's kind of the idea. He hadn't really done anything yet. And as soon as he gets into office, the Catholic Church, the Pope of the time, Pope Pius XI, agrees to swear an oath of loyalty to Hitler. It's called a concordat. Oh my God, what's it called? There's a name for this specific concordat. Anyway, the Pope said, as long as you like allow us to keep our Catholic schools and, you know, after school clubs and everything, we'll swear this oath of loyalty to you. And so Hitler said, okay. Unfortunately, something that the Catholics learned too late is that you cannot trust a dictatorship to keep its word. The Catholic popes of the era after World War II and everything basically said they capitulated on human rights because they wanted to get something for themselves, which is to have Catholic schools and everything. Is it worth it to throw people under the bus, a few, if you can have your Catholic schools and stuff? At the time, they said, yes, it's worth it. We'll throw Jews under the bus. Why not? After the war, they said it's not worth it. We can't do that. But really, it's about the fact that they can't trust dictatorships. That's the bottom line. So I find it fascinating that Pope Francis? Pope Francis. Find it fascinating that he's kind of moving back on that because Trump is very clearly the dictator candidate, right? If anybody was going to be a dictator, it'd be Trump. I can't believe he's like not endorsing like the other party. In fact, he shouldn't be endorsing anybody in my opinion, but whatever. When asked whether it'd be morally admissible to vote for someone who favored the right to abortion, he responded, one must vote, and one must choose the lesser evil. Which is the lesser evil? That lady or that gentleman? I don't know. Each person must think and decide according to his or her own conscience. That's actually a step in the right direction, in my opinion. I don't like that the Pope is involved in politics at all, but if he's going to be, I appreciate that he's not trying to impose a choice on his people like this. I don't know. I guess that's worth something. How busted must your moral barometer be to not know the difference between a paper cut and a decapitation? Absolutely. It was an unprepared remark to a reporter's question, but it's not like he hasn't put thought into this. He offered the cowardly moral ambiguity we've come to expect from high-ranking Catholics who routinely treat Democrats as monsters because they think the government shouldn't be in the business of forcing women to give birth against their will. Yeah, Democrats aren't even in favor of abortion by and large. They are in favor of people being able to make choices for themselves in their own lives and not having that choice imposed upon them by government. That's it. Let's be very clear. It's not hard to know who the lesser evil is. The Democrats support women's rights, oppose gun violence, followed the science during the pandemic, and want to expand health care for as many people as possible. Republicans want to force victims of assaults, including children, to bear their attackers' kids, only offer thoughts and prayers after mass attacks, while doing nothing to get guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them, oppose life-saving vaccines, and push conspiracies that led to more COVID-related deaths. The point is that Republicans are very clearly much worse than Democrats this go around, at the very least. And I don't know how anybody could see it differently, especially the Pope. You know, this Pope, Francis, has been reasonably left-leaning. I mean, he hasn't been terrible. There are a few things that he said that have been warped and bad, but he could be worse. There were some worse popes, for sure. You know, Pope Pius XI, under Hitler, he capitulated with his Concordat. He swore that oath of loyalty to Hitler and remained silent all the way up until 1937, I think. I could be getting these years wrong. He basically wrote this document that was supposed to be distributed to all of the bishops and major pastors in the region in Germany and Italy and stuff. I think he printed 400 of them, and he was getting ready to read this document, basically, on this one morning, publicly, denouncing Nazism, after 3 or 4 years of this happening under his nose. And as a matter of fact, the next pope in line, Pius XII, would have, like, Jewish children dragged away to death camps, screaming under his window while they were going. He would hear that. Anyway, it was bad. And the day before the speech was supposed to be given publicly on radio and everything, Pius XI died. Just like that. Boom, he's gone. And Hitler gets Mussolini to get Pope Pius XII. Pacelli was his name. He took the name Pius XII because, I don't know, it's a tradition or something. He got Pacelli to burn all of the documents and destroy the printing plates that they were using to produce them. Destroy everything. Fascinatingly, though, we got a copy of those speeches because they were submitted into the Vatican archives. And I think in 2009, maybe, the archives opened up and released a trove of information. So that was pretty interesting. Anyway, the point is that popes throughout history have capitulated to terrible people and not seemed to understand the difference between, like, evil and vile dictator, like, really terrible stuff. Yeah, I don't like the way that Democrats operate by and large, but I don't, they're not terrible. They're not evil. Kamala Harris is not evil. Biden's not evil. Donald Trump, I mean, how do you define evil? Dude wants to take over the country in a dictator-like fashion, pretty clearly. He wants to remove people's rights as much as humanly possible. It's just horrific stuff. It's evil. So, anyway, the point is, Kamala Harris is not evil. Donald Trump is. That's pretty clear. I don't know how a pope could miss that after their history of f***ing this up constantly. Oh my God, you guys remember that one time that Biden met the pope and some people just, like, made stuff up about it? You remember that? So Biden thought, well, Biden's a Catholic, of course, and he's like giga Catholic, loves the Pope. Oh my God, he's his favorite guy. So he goes there and he meets the Pope, and he decides now is a good time to tell a story about a baseball player. Telling a story in front of cameras with a translator there because the dude doesn't speak English. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It was a famous...
Oh, I guess he speaks a little English.
African-American baseball player in America.
I know. Yes, Americano, Afro-Americano.
and he didn't
It's his translator. So there's a famous American baseball player.
get to play in the Major League Baseball until he was 45 years old because he was black.
Non gli hanno
He didn't get to play in the major league because he's black.
permesso di giocare nella lega principale fino a che aveva 45 anni perché era nero.
And he was a pitcher.
E lui era quello che batteva.
He was a pitcher.
And usually pitchers lose their arm when they're 35.
In genere loro
So he's 45 years old. Usually they lose their arm at 35. Okay.
quando hanno cominciato.
He pitched
Like, what an incredibly long story. Look, he's shaking his hand the whole time. Are you serious? Oh my God, that would be the most awkward thing I have ever experienced in my entire life if I were the Pope, standing there listening to somebody tell a story in another language that I don't understand, and he will not let go of my hand. Oh my God.
Ha cominciato.
he pitched to win on his 47th birthday.
E invece
The press walked in the locker room and said his name was Satchel Paige.
si chiamava Satchel Paige.
Okay, so he walked in the room after he pitched a really good pitch or whatever.
Allora i giornalisti sono andati nello spogliatoio.
The commanding officer said, Satch, no one's ever pitched to win at age 47. How do you feel about pitching to win on your birthday?
E tutti hanno detto nessuno c'è mai riuscito a fare questo a 47 anni.
So no one's ever done that before. How do you feel about
Ti
it?
senti averlo fatto il giorno del tuo compleanno?
And he looked at me and said, boys, that's not how I look at age.
I'm sorry, what is it?
Boys, that's not how I look at age.
Dice,
He says, boys, that's not how I look at age. I don't get it. Is this a joke? Is he telling a joke?
ragazzi, non si guarda all'età.
I look at it this way.
And the Pope laughs like, oh, that's so funny. What? Why are you laughing? I'm sorry, man. I actually like Biden a lot. I think he's pretty legit. Too legit to quit, one might say. But this is a bad story.
I look at it this way. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
Quanto vecchio saresti se tu non sapessi?
During his meeting late
I'm sorry? How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? Am I missing something? I don't understand. What the hell does that even mean? Anyway, there's a reason I played this for you. This was twisted into propaganda to a degree that you would not believe. Okay, so somebody played this and added subtitles to it that were fictitious. All right, that was like a weird story that didn't really make much sense, but okay, whatever. I guess it was funny to Biden at some point, right? I think it's an allegory about saying you can still do a good job even at an old age. Okay, fair. Yeah, that would make sense because Biden's being criticized for being old. And honestly, the Pope is old as sin too. So anyway, all right, I'll take that. Listen to the propaganda that came out about it. The caption under the video says, Joe Biden has a total mental breakdown during his visit with the Pope. American President Joe Biden tells the Pope, you're the famous African-American baseball player in America.
Thank you for that. He was a famous African-American baseball player in America.
Yeah, so they're just like, they're blinking a clown face over him and claiming that he's saying he's the God. It's just like so vile. Like, why would they do this? You know, there's plenty of stuff to criticize him over. Why would you lie like this? Brazenly, openly lie. Like, make it up. Why? Anyway, Jesus Christ, man. I gotta focus more on the Pope. I don't talk about him enough. It's insane. I think you know the answer to that. Yeah, absolutely. I've been reading a lot about Catholicism lately because of, you know, the subject that I'm writing about. It's very intensive research, very detailed and fascinating stuff, honestly. Although I'm not as interested in like Catholicism and their role in the Third Reich as I am in the Protestant Church. You know, after everything happened, you know, in World War II and all of that other stuff, and the Allies took control of the West Germany portion there, they had to denazify. First time the word denazify was used was in Pentagon correspondence in 1943, 2 years before the war would be won by the Allies. And Roosevelt was trying to work with people in the Pentagon and others to come up with a plan to denazify, and it was like an uphill battle. They created a full-blown, brand new religious movement called Positive Christianity. It was a version of Christianity created because they felt like they'd been beaten down by the Versailles Treaty, They were forced to pay war reparations for World War I, and they felt humiliated by it. The Germans did. And so they wanted a positive spin on Christianity, one where they are the heroes of the story, the Germans are, and they're fighting against the big evil, like cabal, the Jewish cabal or whatever other thing. It was just nuts. Positive Christianity had some really interesting features to it. First of all, they removed the Old Testament. They kept some verses of the Old Testament because some of it was culturally relevant, like the story of the three wise men and stuff. One translation of the German Christians' Bible, which was German Christians were like the extremists. They were the Nazi Christians. They called themselves German Christians, and the others called themselves the Confessing Christians or Confessing Church. Anyway, German Christians, there's one translation of a Bible that they used that mentioned the Ten Commandments. Pretty much everything else was removed from the Old Testament. And for the New Testament, they zeroed in heavily on John chapter 2, I think it is, where Jesus braids a whip outside of the temple and like comes in and whips the money changers or whatever because, you know, Jews are evil and money grubbing and deserve to be whipped according to this ideology. Incorrect ideology, by the way. Do not ban me, YouTube. It's very clearly wrong. Anyway, so they rewrote Jesus' character to be heroic and intelligent and strong and Aryan. He had to be Aryan from a lineage that originated in the Germanic region. So they rewrote it to be a story where Jesus was an Aryan fighting against the Jews. And they removed a whole bunch of stuff from Paul's writings. They said they called him Rabbi Paul because he very heavily modified Christianity and kind of guided it down a path that the Nazis argued, and actually I would agree with, did not really represent what Jesus intended or what he was trying to create or whatever. Paul went his own way with this stuff very much. So anyway, they removed a whole bunch of stuff from Paul's writings. That's what I've been writing about. I just thought it was really fascinating to bring up. Hold on, let me see. I've got other stuff here. Oh yeah, here. Check this out. There's a big stadium called the Sports Palace. Sportspalast-E? No, A-S-T. That's a German word that means sports palace. It's a large stadium that could hold 20,000 people or more. And they held events there like every Saturday night or whatever. And the German Christians, Hitler was trying to get the German Christians into a position of power. So he was basically scheduling people to go up there and give speeches about positive Christianity, effectively. One of the people he got up there was named Reinhold Krause, Krause, and he talked about the Old Testament and what it contained and why they shouldn't follow it anymore. I'm reading from parts of my chapter here, or parts of my chapter. De-Judaizing Christianity is what they were trying to do with it. Because Judaism is like integrated right into Christianity. Like, how do you separate the two? It's Christianity's origin myths, like Adam and Eve and stuff. So they were trying to find a way to remove all of that stuff from Christianity and replace it with something. They chose to replace it with their Aryan mythology and some stuff about Odin, because he was like a Germanic god or whatever. Anyway, de-Judaizing Christianity started by scheduling special talks by Bible scholars to debate whether the Old Testament should be removed from the Bible entirely. This is from my chapter on the subject. On November 13th, 1933, a man named Reinhold Krause gave a speech at the Berlin Sports Palace, or Sports Palace. Krause was a local school teacher and leader of the Berlin German Christians, the Nazified denomination of Christianity. Events were held at the Sports Palace regularly. Krause mocked the Old Testament in front of 20,000 people. He said it contained stories about cattle traders and pimps. Even without alterations, this is me speaking now in my book, even without alterations, they created an alternate interpretation in which Jesus was a heroic fighter battling against the untrustworthy Jews. Rewriting the odd word here or there and removing entire sections enabled them to align their ideology with the Bible with very few changes to the text. The German Christians' job of removing any trace of Judaism from the Bible was made simpler by the fact that many Bible beliefs are based on culture and existing beliefs rather than scripture. The concept of sin, for example, is a later creation. Anyway, I go off in a whole thing. If you want to read the book, then check it out. It's not out yet, but it'll be out pretty soon. OwenMorgan.com. Check the description, it may be in there. But anyway, super interesting subject, in my opinion. They really did a number on Christianity generally, hollowed it out and replaced it with stuff. It's fascinating. And afterward, they had to find a way to denazify it. How do you root Nazis out of that? It's a religious belief. There was a whole plan that the U.S. government had, and I'll just give you some ideas here. They asked some of the top ranking, like, confessing church, like the oppositional church. They asked some of the top ranking leaders to take over the German Christian church, and they said no. The reason that they said no is actually because they very much agreed with the German Christians on nearly everything, except for just a couple of things. There really was not much of a gap between the Nazi Christians and the normal Christians, truthfully. Anyway, the French and the British were a lot more relaxed with their denazification efforts. The U.S. is more strict. The U.S. finally allowed the church to denazify on its own as long as it was well documented. So basically, you got a quota. You got to turn it in and explain to us who you removed and why. So they start removing and demoting people that had some kind of connection to the Nazi movement or that, believed in this German Christian stuff or whatever. And they would demote them into positions of like hospital chaplain or tiny little backwoods churches or whatever. Unfortunately, that was displacing women who had to take those roles on for themselves because all of the men had gone to war. So women were finally being ordained for the first time in German history and were leading churches in religious services and everything. And they were replaced. They were removed from the church leadership positions when the Reich church members started being replaced. Really sad. Anyway, Catholics and Protestants both asked the government to stop dismissing Nazi party members because it meant removing experts from their positions. The EKD, which is it means the Evangelische Kirche Deutschland, EKD. It means the Evangelical Church of Germany. The EKD governing council argued people shouldn't be charged for doing things that weren't illegal, but Nazi law allowed a lot of terrible stuff. So there is like a ton of, the confessing church, the opposition to Hitler, it took over after like Hitler was gone. But it was just as depraved as the German Christians in a lot of ways, obviously. And they wanted to keep people in those positions if they could. Also, there's something called, what is it, Perselschein, I think. There was a way for Nazis to keep their positions, not be demoted or kicked out or whatever, go to jail. And the way to do so was to get something called a Perselschein, I believe is what it was. Persil was the brand of laundry detergent, and a Perselschein was a letter basically scrubbing their record clean. A letter from the victims of Nazi atrocities. They had to get a letter from somebody who was victimized by it and turn it in to the Allies, or they would lose their position, basically. Some churches set up a kind of like an industry where they were pumping out these Perselschein letters over and over again for just anybody that wanted them, but that was super uncommon. And they could only do that so much because it became obvious after a very short time what was happening. The Allied denazification program was finished by the fall of 1948, and it was widely seen as an utter failure. Surprisingly, I think Germany's done a great job of denazifying up to now. They, free of Nazis, as far as I can tell, for the most part. Of the 3.6 million Germans summoned before the Spruchhammer, which I haven't done enough research on yet to speak about, only 1,667 were removed permanently from public office. 23,000 were conditionally removed and eventually reinstated. And 1.1 million, although party members, were exonerated as having been low-ranking or provisional members. Acquitted altogether were 1.2 million. Some of the latter had actually resisted, others benefited from the Purselschein. Yeah, that's what it is. Pursilschein, Purselschein. Proceedings were dropped against 1.2 million Germans, for example, against miners and German soldiers returning from the front. They had heresy hearings too. Anyway, it's super fascinating stuff. I got like a whole page of notes on this. If you guys want to read the book, check it out. OwenMorgan.com. Check the description. Not sure if it's out yet, but keep a lookout on Amazon. Anyway, let me know what you think about it.